Hey guys, welcome to part 2. I suggest if you haven't done so already to go watch part 1, which came out earlier this week. But without further ado, here's our part 2.
Entire chapter about it's called Chasm Duty, right?
Yep.
Bridgeford gets put on Chasm Duty, where they're going down and they're just like salvaging the crevices between planes, I believe, for random swords, armor, supplies, anything that fell down there. Um, and it was an interesting thing. I was really excited to see it because we get to see what it's like down in these deep crevices. This is also the crevices that like chasm fiends like live,
Mm-hmm.
right? They live in these deep down crevices. So um, I thought that was super cool. I was really excited. Whatever it said they were going down there to see what kind of mysteries would be, what kind of questions we might get answered.
All right, so
I
go ahead.
I was just gonna tag along on the chasm part of that. I was super curious to see what was going to be down in the chasms as well. And as they descended into the chasms in between the plateaus, all the descriptions that I was getting, I'm just envisioning them. It almost felt like they were descending into the underworld, almost, where it's a world that's not even like the surface. There's different creatures there. There's slime and there's all this fungus and stuff growing around that, and then there's all these dead bodies here, and it definitely seemed like they were going into a different world almost as they went down in the chasm.
All right here, I want you guys both to open up this picture that I've sent you. There is some
Okay.
wonderful fan art in the Stormlight Archive fandom, and I got this artist's permission. Her name is Lyraina, and she has done some fan art of this title. This piece is called Chasm Duty. I will put it up on screen for our viewers, and I love this piece. She did such a good job. I will link her in the description below for you guys. She does some other stuff, Stormlight Archive related, so you can go look at that. And I just wanted you guys to see this piece. Any thoughts?
So my biggest thought was I envisioned, in my very limited imagination. I'm not a great envisionary. It is very straight, crisp sides. Just plain rock, plain like ground down the
Mm-hmm.
sides, and at least in this depiction, it's all like grown and uneven and unpredictable almost along the walls, um, and such. But it is pretty accurate, I guess, to what I envision of seeming underwater. It's kind of like a greenish blue, like it looks like plants and moss all over the place. Um, but a very cool image. I really like that. It's super cool looking. Um,
Elliot, thoughts?
I totally I totally agree with you, Paul. My mental image of this when I read it was kind of a canyon with pretty smooth sides of kind of rock slab. But as I reevaluate that mental image that I had, I don't think what I was thinking of really captures the creepiness of it. And this work, this bit of artwork totally does capture the creepiness of it. I wouldn't be too scared to walk down the smooth side canyon, whereas I don't know that I want to walk down this canyon here
you
in
don't know what
this
you're
picture. This
touching.
is
You don't know what's
yeah,
what's there.
exactly.
It's all abnormal and gross, weird.
Exactly. So very very well depicted in a visual way, the creepiness and just that unsettling feeling that I think the Bridgemen feel when they're down there. I feel that looking at this picture.
Yeah, I had the same thoughts when I originally listened to this. I did imagine straight chasms. Maybe they twist a little bit, and then down at the bottom, There's like it's wider because of the water runoff of high storms, and yeah, it's dark and creepy down there. But when I saw this picture, I love this picture. It's so good. All right.
I wanted to mention something specific here about the bridgemen going down into the chasms and performing their chasm duty, which essentially is grave robbing. It's basically what they're doing. I think they even mentioned that in the chapter that's what they're doing. And I noted that grave robbing is kind of widely considered the lowest of the low things that you could do in your life. You're really, really desperate if you're going and robbing graves to get some money or something like that.
Right.
And it's just another example of bridgemen being forced to do the worst of the worst. They're not even considered human. They're not even treated as they're lower than slaves. You wouldn't even make a slave do something like this, but they're sent in to rob the bodies of the dead and bring back their things, and it just shows just how low these poor bridgemen are.
Yeah. Before we get into specifics of the chasm duties and how the bridgemen interact in there, I want to back up a little bit to the beginning of chapter 27. And Kaladin and Syl are walking back into the apothecary shop to sell this knobweed sap. And a couple different things happen here. The apothecary walks in and greets Kaladin as if he's the old feeble man trying to scam at people that are coming in. He recognizes Kaladin, straightens back up, and it's like, "Oh, hi." And Kaladin puts this knobweed sap on the counter, and the apothecary is very out of his sorts very quickly. He does not want to admit to Kaladin what this is, how expensive this is, how much he's willing to pay to keep this secret that Kaladin is understanding here. Eliot, do you want to expound upon this a little?
Yeah, I do. Kaladin figured out the sap scam, I'm gonna call it.
Yep.
He realizes in that moment there that he's just going to sell the apothecary the sap, but the apothecary's like, oh, that's not worth anything. And Kaladin, he realizes, actually, no, this definitely is worth something. I used it and I saw it work. And he realizes in that moment that he can leverage this, that he can hold this over the apothecary's head and use this as a source of income, which was pretty brilliant, actually.
Paul, thoughts?
All the moments at the apothecaries or I don't know, storefront owners are always interesting to me, and they always try to do some form of tricking or acting naive or assuming the other person is naive or dumb. And I thought it was interesting in that he totally tries to undercut or undercharge Kaladin for this. Definitely trying to play him, but Kaladin. We also see a repetitive theme of our respective protagonists being able to see through this, which I think is cool. And he kind of works around it, and he gets one sky mark, isn't it, for it?
I believe it's 2, but yes.
Okay, that's what it was. In which I don't remember all the currency. Isn't a sky mark like a sapphire?
Yes. So
The
sky is blue, so they're referred to as sky marks, the sapphires. Diamonds are clear, and so those are like diamonds are white and clear, so those are referred to as clear marks or clear chips. So there's just a common phrase for diamonds and sapphires and that type of thing.
And on the scale of most valuable, was it ruby or emerald that was the most?
I believe so.
Expensive, and then it was
emerald, right?
I want to say emerald, ruby, and then maybe sapphire.
It all has to do with what they can soul cast, is how they're based. So I don't remember.
I see. But anyways, I'm assuming a sapphire mark is pretty good. Like with at least some. So do we know exactly what Kaladin's plans are for this with this money he's earned off of the knobweed sap? I know he's I know he's wanting like supplies and food for his men to help them grow and heal from injuries and such, but I don't remember if there was an exact he needs this certain amount so that he can get this certain item. Um,
So I took it as he spent most of that, maybe not all of it, but most of it on the the stew that he makes for at the end of the chapter. That's really the tipping point, the moment where he wins over the bridgeman of Bridge 4, where he buys a cauldron and he buys all these different ingredients that Rock the chef can cook up into this awesome stew. So I don't know if he's got any left over from that, but I took it that he pretty much dumped most of that into the stew, which was a brave move for him. I mean, that was a lot of money to spend on one thing. And he even has a moment in the chapter where he kind of doubts himself, where he's thinking, oh, this is all a bit silly. Is this even going to work? And then one by one, the bridgemen come out of the hut and they join him. And that's the moment where he finally reaches them, where they finally understand that he's there to help them.
that's true. I'd almost forgotten that. Well, I knew he did that, but I guess I forgot that that costs money.
Yeah, yeah.
But that was a really good moment, and um, there's kind of a good thought he had in that I can't get through to these men with actions or I can't punish them. They're at the lowest of lows. But food, no one's gonna turn down some food, especially in that some good food, especially in
Exactly.
their situation. And so that was a really good moment. And we saw a lot of with your word singing also they join in song and it kind of brings a lot of people together and uh, it's a good starting ground for um, kind of building allegiance and a friendship between them.
I love that scene where they're finally all sitting down around this fire with the stew and just singing songs, and you could feel that camaraderie, and it felt good because Kaladin's been working so hard over the last few Kaladin chapters to get to this point, and he's hit a lot of walls where he's tried to inspire them and they haven't done anything, and then this was the breakthrough moment where all it took was some food and a good song to bring all the men together.
Yep, they certainly bonding over the campfire, and even before that, in back in the chasms, they're Rock and Teft and Kaladin are all talking together in like kind of in the front as they're leading um, the bridgemen through these chasms to salvage for whatever they can find, and Dunny is towards the front as well, and he's kind of listening in. Kaladin notices Dunny and includes him in this conversation. Um, I think we've been told, I don't remember this, but I always envisioned Dunny as young. Dunny is, I envisioned him as a 17-year-old kid who messed up doing something, wound up in this bridge run. He's young, he's naive, he's certainly more willing to not give up hope than the rest of these older bridgemen. And uh, Rock and Kaladin have a good conversation with Dunny, and they even sing a song, and and Rock joins him, and the rest of the bridgemen aren't at that point. They aren't totally like on par with Kaladin, and some of them even tell Dunny to be quiet, but they get through it and on to the campfire in the evening.
That's true. I had similar imagery of Dunny in kind of a young kid, almost. You could tell that unlike the other bridgemen, he isn't so down in the dumps that he like refuses to try to ever have a nice time. He talk they conversate, they have nice like discussion, and then it turns out he's a great singer, and so That shows up a few times of him singing, and so he at least is willing to try and make something out of these situations he's provided. And so I think this is exactly the kind of bridgeman that Kaladin's hoping for. Just someone who will talk and at least want to grow and advance in some way, shape, or form, instead of the men who just show a true display of just hopelessness and having given up.
He also does a kata, as he calls it, with a spear in front of all the bridgemen. So he picks up this spear and gets heckled by some of the other bridgemen. I think Moash is the one who starts it, and Moash says, "Oh, you've probably never even held a spear, your lordship," as Gaz calls him, and Moash has kind of pulled that slur. He calls him that as well, and Kaladin kind of loses it for a second and just like, all right, I'm gonna show him. And he does this, it's this spinning like kata of showing, it's a show, it's a what you do in a parade. It's from karate, and it's just a display of how fast you can move, your body, how fast you can move this tool that you have. And all of the bridgemen are gobsmacked, if you will. They're all watching this and they're like, "Wow, that was impressive." Even the ones who were just heckling him before. And Teft and Rock, right after he did it, whispered to him, and Teft sees a spren, but we figure that it's Syl spinning around him, and Teft is like, "There was a spren spinning around you," and Kaladin looks at Syl, and she's like, refuses to look at him, and so it wasn't me. Don't worry about it. And it's I had a very clear image of this kata in my head of him doing jumps and spins and throwing this spear around and in the middle of this chasm.
Yeah, I think of a real world example of this. Where we live is, have you seen the people who have the signs and they spin the signs and throw them up? Do you know what I'm talking about on the street corners?
Yeah.
That is. I'm sure this was the equivalent, right?
Yep, exactly.
Very cool.
Kaladin would have made a great sign spinner.
Yep. Yes, he would have been an incredible sign spinner.
I noticed some specific things about this kata that he does. In fact, I want to read a couple sections because I also want to reference this back all the way to the very first chapter of the book. So I'll read first what's in chapter 27 here when he performs this. So it says, Kaladin spun through the last motions of the kata, chasm forgotten, bridgemen forgotten, fatigue forgotten. For a moment it was just him and the wind. He fought with her, and she laughed. And then later on, a few seconds later, Teft is kind of describing it, and he says, the speed, the grace, and there was some sort of spren zipping around you between your sweeps, glowing with a pale light. It was beautiful, which is the reference to Syl we were just talking about. But that made me remember all the way back to chapter 1, where Kaladin is fighting in the war as the squad leader, and there's the young boy from his squad who gets injured, Sen, and we're kind of seeing it from his perspective. And Sen sees this. For a moment, Sen thought he could see something surrounding the squad leader, a warping of the air, like the wind itself, become visible. And that caught my eye the first time I read it, but now I'm starting to put a few things together. I wonder if that was Syl all the way back in that moment, and Kaladin wasn't aware of her at the time, but it talks about the wind become visible around him. Well, what could that be but Syl, the windspren, who is around Kaladin, and here again when he performs the kata here in the chasm, she dances with him, if you will, in this performing. So I wonder if those are tied together, and if not, then Kaladin definitely has some sort of affinity with wind. But I thought that was a cool parallel between now and then.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, like a really cool comparison, and it could be true that Syl was following Kaladin around from the beginning, and maybe she just had never appeared to him yet.
Right, exactly.
I would also, what I was thinking whenever it talks about how he fights with the wind and such, that maybe you mentioned him having an affinity for wind, that perhaps um, there are like other windspren that also like are kind of attracted to him for whatever reason. Maybe they're not as intelligent as Syl, but they just have this natural affinity for him. Um, and so they kind of cluster around whenever he has these moments, I guess, like the moment with Sen at the beginning, and then this is kind of, he has lots of moments, right?
Mhm.
And in these moments, maybe Windspren are into that. I don't know. Maybe they think it's super cool, and so they kind of crowd around him. But I am curious to see that, because it's definitely, that seems very intentional. This kind of reoccurring theme of the air and the wind, and how he's storm blessed, and then having
Yeah.
this little companion who's a wind sprint. Like it too much is adding up there for it to not be something cool.
Okay. Any other observations before we move on to chapter 28?
Nope.
Wait, Elliot, didn't you have a Kaladin theory? Was that your Kaladin theory?
Oh, no. Yes. Oh, good catch. I do have another thought, and it is important. So, yes. Last episode, I postulated a theory about Kaladin and his hatred, his revulsion for Light Eyes, and my crazy out there theory slash hope was that he got betrayed or backstabbed by Light Eyes. Specifically, I was hoping it would be tied to him winning or fighting a shard bearer, specifically because in the flashback chapters, his friend growing up mentioned that if you could become a Light Eyes by acquiring a shard blade in battle. And my theory was, well, maybe Kaladin did that. Maybe he defeated a shard bearer in battle, but then was denied the actual shard himself by the Light Eyes, and therefore he hates that. And there's a hidden little hint in here in this chapter that is strengthening my theory there, that there's a point where when the bridgeman is asking him about that, and Kaladin's comment to himself was, "Oh, I tried that before," but then right after that, he's like, "Oh, I got to keep my mouth shut about that," and that immediately rung a bell in my mind of, "Ooh, I think I might be onto something here."
Okay. All right. Was that him talking to Teft and Rock after the kata? I believe is when he mentions that. Rock Rock sees the kata and mentions kind of offhand, maybe you should fight a shard bearer. And then Kaladin snaps at him and says, "I already tried that." I believe that's the
Yes, exactly.
I believe that's the scene.
Yes, thank you. I forgot to write down the page number for that, so I couldn't look it up right there. But that's exactly what I was thinking of. Is that that little interchange there between Rock and Kaladin, and Kaladin's little slip. I I really want this to be true.
Yep. And then uh, Teft is like, "Wait, you did what now?" And then Kaladin's like, "Where's Dunny?" and walks
Yeah,
away. Yep.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've read this book a couple times. I can recount that type of thing. Hee
Mhm.
uh,
See,
uh, yes, good theory. Any thoughts, Paul?
I like that theory. That's a good one. I personally don't think that he like killed a shard bear and then was like denied a blade. I don't know. I just couldn't see that happening. Maybe, but I think there's perhaps he had a bad run in, I guess, trying to get a shard blade, and maybe he's very upset about it. But I don't think it was exactly he won and was denied. I can't tell you what I do think. I'm not sold on that at the moment.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
But
All right. Let's move on to chapter 20. Well, before we completely move on, Bridge 4 is the end of chapter 27. And that is my word, progress. He feels he finally has a good grasp on Bridge 4, and now he has to get them to stay alive long enough for that to mean something. And that's how we leave Kaladin at the end of part 2. Okay, now we can move on. Chapter 28. So Dalinar is not well. This chapter opens up with Adolin being afraid for his father. He is frightened, is how the chapter starts, and he sees in his father's eyes this anguish, this tearing apart inside of Dalinar that Adolin put there. Adolin confronted him. They've since made amends. Back in chapter 26, Dalinar makes a point to address his son as an adult, forgive him for what he said, and they make amends, and Adolin's fine with it. But that next chapter, after the plateau run, Adolin sees that his father is not well. Dalinar is fighting in his mind of abdicating. He is going to step down from High Prince, and that's a big deal. That is a very big deal for politics on the Shattered Plains. He would need to go back to Alethkar, back to Kholinar, where the Kholin house is from, and retire there and leave Adolin to lead the house. And at the very end of chapter 28, he resolves that, but that's not before a bunch of pounding of rock. And Elliot, you mentioned this a little earlier in the episode, that he had an epiphany of, why aren't there shards to help the common man? Why didn't the Knights Radiant help the beggar with the stone, as in the Way of Kings? The Way of Kings says the beggar's trying to get up the hill with the rock, and Noadon gets out of his carriage to help him. Why didn't the Knights Radiant do that? They have these shard blades, these shard plate, to enhance strength, to make it easier to cut stone, as you see him do in chapter 28. Why is there no mention of that? That's what Dalinar is wrestling with.
And I gotta say, I'm wrestling with it too. I'm definitely alongside Dalinar in this, where he's asking a lot of good questions that I don't see obvious answers to. If the Knights Radiant were so honorable and they were so out to protect the people, why did they keep this technology for themselves, and why was it used only in battle? Or was that the case? We've already seen a couple examples where the Knights Radiant were a bit misunderstood. So maybe they did actually do some of that and they just don't know about that, or it's been misconstrued over the millennia since then. I don't know, but I'm asking all the same questions Delinar is right now.
I want to say that that's something that we'll have answered. I'm unsure if we'll ever find out why there's no shard hammers or shard shovels. I don't know. But I did really like how I briefly mentioned it before, how Dalinar kind of hops in there with his shard plate on, right? And just grabs a big hammer and tells all the workers, get out, and he's gonna do this. And so he just starts smacking away at it and just does a ton of work um, for these men. And everyone's watching and everyone's confused and thinking he's just gone off the deep end. He's about to, I don't know, be thrown into the loony bin. He's just he people. It's with that notion, like you said, in the Way of Kings, of like the king coming and helping the man with the stone, with his burden, right? he's basically acting that out in this situation, and everyone thinks he's really gone off the deep end.
There's a scene at the beginning of chapter 28 which made me smile. I believe his second in command's name is Teleb. I don't
Mhm.
remember if that's exactly how you say that, but he tells Teleb to tell the men to sit down and have a good time. And then Teleb runs over there and commands them, like orders them, sit down and have a good time. And Dalinar's like, thanks, but that's not really what I meant. Like, you could have been a little
Mhm.
nicer, but
Yeah, like if they are not sitting
yep,
and having a good time, then they will be prosecuted. They will be in
right,
trouble.
exactly.
Be punished. I did think that was very, very funny. He took things very, very literally, and such that was hilarious. It also goes to, I guess, show how unorthodox an order like that would be. Um, there's no, I bet Teleb had never had to do that before, but it also said he was a very literal person. Um,
I mean, I don't know what I would think if I was a laborer and my high prince walked up with full shard blade or with full shard plate, and it's like, "Yo, go sit down. I'm gonna do this," and I'm like, "Don't you have something better to do?" Like, okay, but aren't you busy? Like,
yeah.
At the same time, I think though, think of what an impact that would have on those men to see Dalinar stooping down to their level and doing a task that nobody wants to do. I mean, that sounds like a lot of hard work to be digging a trench in pure rock for this latrine or whatever it is, and Dalinar's jumping in to help out and do that for him. I would definitely be saying, dude, why you're wasting your time, but at the same time, I'd also be thinking, wow, he thought to come help us with our task. That's pretty cool. And I think it's Dalinar starting to act upon the stuff he's reading in Way of Kings, not just listening and thinking about it now. He's starting to do some of that stuff.
right? He's as he debates in his mind over the Way of Kings and all of this in his head. He's very hands on, and the fact that he's doing the things that the Way of Kings is teaching kind of resolves in his mind that he needs to abdicate, because he understands that I would not be doing this 7 years ago when Gavilar was still alive. I have changed. I have lost my taste for battle, and so I need to abdicate and figure this out because I recognize that I am not the same person I was when I was given this position. So that him digging a trench gives him clarity to abdicate.
I like too how it's very literally described as he's digging this trench, and as he's digging, he's slowly making up his mind more and more, and he even realizes towards the end, right before Navani interrupts him, that he would have made up his mind, he would have made his decision exactly when he finished the trench. Just this idea of physical labor, doing a hard job, helping you process something, is definitely something that I can relate to. That's something I can do sometimes. Is sometimes I just need a mindless task to keep myself busy while I'm thinking through something, and that's exactly what Dalinar is doing here.
Right. At the very end of the chapter, we'll talk about the Spanreed conversation with Yasna in a second. But at the very end of the chapter, he has a conversation with Navani, and he speaks it out loud that he is going to abdicate. That's how you know he's serious. He would not tell someone something unless he was prepared to do that and follow his word. So the fact that he tells someone and is going to tell Adolin in the morning, his mind is made up. He is going to abdicate and go back to Kholinar.
So yeah, he's very much a man of his word. So we'll see what happens with him. I guess going back to the good old Colin estate. Um, but yeah, I am very curious to talk about these span reads. This old, I guess, like a telegraph
Yep.
Like that, kind of sending messages, transcribing almost. And so Dalinar is communicating with Yasna, and I thought it was also interesting that Dalinar and Yasna kind of had like a little code between them. He said a specific
Yeah.
phrase to let her know that that there were other people around, and so don't send anything, uh, that you don't want other people knowing,
Right.
which is interesting. So I guess slightly backing up though, can you explain a little bit of what span reads are?
Sure. So I don't know if I heard this from one of you guys, but somebody said this to me in the past that Stormlight is their primitive form of electricity. They light their streets with it, they light their houses with it, they power their couple different things with it, and they power their clocks with it, as we've seen in old Hearthstone, and now they write messages with it. So it's a piece of paper, and I kind of envision it as a clipboard, kind of, and it's got a stone in the top right and a big dot in the top left, and you spin the gemstone to indicate if you're about to write or if they're about to write, and if you're ready, that type of thing. And the gemstone in wherever you're writing to is going to do the same thing. So you're going to place the pen on the paper, and it's going to write the same thing that the person's writing. So you can draw pictures, as they do in this chapter. They can write back and forth to each other, although Dalinar himself doesn't write, so he asks Adolin's newest love interest to do it for him. And yeah, so it's their primitive form of telegraph, I guess.
I gotta say, it seemed like a pretty elegant solution to use a small amount of magic to do this. I thought when it was first starting to describe them that this is going to be some elaborate Yasna's writing, and then the words are magically, being transmitted through the air and appearing on Dalinar's span read. But it's actually a lot simpler than that. All it is the pen on Dalinar's page is somehow tied to the pen on Yasna's page, and it's making the exact same movements, which then just spells out all the exact same words, or as we see later, picture that's being spelled on Yasna's span read. Which I thought that was pretty cool.
Yep. It is a hard magic system, as they say. It has deliberate rules, and you know exactly how it works.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I also thought it was very cool. So talking about drawing a picture on there, uh, Yasta mentions that she has a new ward, which I'm still assuming we know as Shalon. And so it's kind of the first little allusion to her in this part of the book. And so I guess, I imagine things are going well over there. Um, she's working closely with Yasna, at least close enough to be present during this text message session. Um, and so yeah, that was cool. And yeah, so we got a little glimpse of what Shalon is up to.
Yeah, we got a Shalon reference. I noticed that too.
Yeah, the Shalon draws a picture, which is in the book. It's not in my version. It's not on that chapter. It's a few chapters previous, and I I didn't actually realize this until this read that was that picture that she was drawing, and it's a very crude picture of a chasm fiend, but the painting or the drawing itself is good. But that's I always saw that art and was like, that's kind of odd, and I didn't realize that was supposed to be the literal drawing that Shalon was sending to Dalinar.
That is
Yeah,
interesting. Wow.
I did notice that too, and I appreciated having that in there. This isn't the first time we've actually seen some of what's supposed to be Shalon's sketches in some of the artwork in the book, which I thought was cool.
Yep. So
And so,
go ahead.
no, you got it.
Okay. Uh, at the end of the span read conversation, Dalinar is talking with Navani about Yasta, And Dalinar has this interesting quote about Yasna and about honor. He mentions honor and Yasna in the same sentence, which a lot of Alethi would consider that blasphemous, but Navani asks Dalinar, "Why is it you trust my daughter so much when others almost universally revile her? I consider their disdain for her to be a recommendation," he said. "She is a heretic. She refused to join any of the devotees because she did not believe in their teachings. Rather than compromise for the sake of appearances, she has been honest and has refused to make professions she does not believe. I find that a sign of honor." Dalinar doesn't care what you believe as long as you believe it wholeheartedly. He doesn't care if you disagree with him. He just wants you to care about something. He wants to have good conversations, and he does have good conversations with Yasna and trusts her, even though she doesn't believe the same things he does.
I think too, Dalinar appreciates someone who's gonna give it to you straight. He doesn't like people like Sadius, where he's constantly having to double guess what is Sadius's motive, what's he trying to do here, does he mean what he says? But he appreciates Yasna, where yes, she's a heretic, but at least she's very upfront and open about it. She's gonna just say, yeah, I'm a heretic. I don't believe that. And even if Dalinar doesn't agree with her, he still appreciates the fact that she's open and honest and straightforward, and that's the kind of person he likes to deal with.
True. I think that is super interesting because they seem like very different people, and that she's very outspoken and would say what's on her mind, whereas Dalinar, he does speak his mind, but very selectively whenever he feels is appropriate to do so. More focused on uh, a deep sense of respect for peers and those around him. So I think it's kind of interesting that he seems to hold Yasna in very high regard. I also think it's interesting that he talks about how other people's disdain for her is like a recommendation to
Yes.
him, because he's so fed up with how uh, how I guess the mass population or mass people look down upon things that he views as right, and so if he knows anything about his situation where he struggled with people, looking away or discounting him as crazy because of what he believes, that he if someone else is also experiencing the same thing, he probably feels that kind of similarity there.
He's sick and tired of the superficial Alethi high culture. He wants people to talk
Exactly.
to him straight, like discuss things face to face instead of spread rumors and pretend to be there for the Almighty and for Gavilar, but really they're just after gem hearts. He wants genuine.
Sure. I'm very happy to see that relationship. I feel like that's an interesting relationship because they do have a lot of character similarities, but they're very different people, very different. And I'm really curious to see kind of how that relationship develops as we kind of go further into this.
Speaking of relationships, it seems clear that Yasna and her mother Navani have an interesting relationship. Yasna makes the comment over the span read about watch out for her, and that not realizing that Navani's in the room there, hearing everything she's saying, and there's a little comment there about Navani, she sniffed or something like that when that came across, and that makes me curious. What's the relationship there? Do they really not like each other, or is it maybe a little more playful than that? I think there's more to discover there.
Certainly, Navani has a very interesting relationship with everyone in her family, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious to see about that, because that's two very strong personalities, kind of coming at each other.
We also get a few hints as to what Yasna is researching in Carbanth. She's the one who messages Dalinar, not the other way around. So needs to talk about something that Dalinar knows and wants him to recap for her. And so she's researching something to do with the Chasm Fiends and the Parshendi. So we know that.
Yeah, I found that interesting too, where she's probing for more details on the Parshendi, which makes me think that she's researching them. She's trying to learn more about them, which makes a lot of sense. They killed Gavilar, and so I think she probably is looking into his death, and in a way she seems to be doing research maybe on the Parshendi about why they would do what they did, and that would hopefully maybe answer the questions that the characters have, and then also I have about the motives behind the Parshendi, why they're doing what they're doing, where they come from, some of that stuff we already talked about. I I think Yasna is trying to find those same answers. It's my guess.
Okay. So with that, any closing thoughts on chapter 28 before we back up to part 2 in general?
I have no more on chapter 28.
I don't think so.
Okay. I think we've covered it very well. So this ends part 2. Part 3, which we will get into next week, we'll be discussing, or we'll be back to Shallan. We'll be back to Shallan and Kaladin. And we'll get to see more of Kharbranth after our interludes, of course, which I know Paul's excited for. So,
Very.
but yeah, we'll go back to Shallan, so we'll learn more about Shallan. Any closing thoughts on part 2 as a whole?
Yeah, I definitely do. I've been trying to look for sort of a theme or a takeaway from part two, since there seemed to be a very specific one from part one, which was the honor that we saw kept popping up in all throughout part one. So I was thinking about what part two might be, and it didn't take me too long before I realized that I think my theme for part two is servant leadership. That
Mhm.
one word
Single
phrase.
word, yes.
Yes, yes, exactly. That I used as one of my words a couple episodes ago, a few episodes ago. I think that the concepts discussed in the book The Way of Kings that Dalinar's reading, we first get exposed to that here in part two, and that is a major theme running through all of these chapters, is Dalinar wrestling with what does it mean to be a leader, what does it mean to be a servant leader, and really coming to that final decision of I need to serve my people by stepping down and stepping aside. And then also in the Kaladin chapters, Kaladin's faced with the daunting task of getting all these bridgemen to follow him, to care, to actually put some effort into saving their lives and not just giving up. And Kaladin's put into a position of leadership over them, but has to figure out how to motivate them and inspire them without being able to punish them, like we talked about before. And the answer that he finds is servant leadership. It's he learns that he has to serve them in order to get them to follow him. He helps them. He saves their lives. He spends all of his hard-earned money on making them a stew so they can have one night of camaraderie and song. And I think that seems to be the lesson that both of our main characters in this section have learned, is what it means to be a leader, and being a leader means serving those that you lead. It was a very cool part two, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Me too. I'm very excited for part 3. Part 2 was very, very enjoyable. You did a great job summarizing that. I'm gonna stick with the whole servant leadership as my thing too. I don't have any more to add to that.
I think it's
in
very well
summary.
summarized. Well done, Elliot. And part 3 is not that. I'll say that.
I have a prediction for, I guess, if we were saying part 1 is honor, part 2 is servant leadership, part 3, if we're going back to Shalon, I think it's going to be more about like wisdom or knowledge, because um,
Because that's what Shalon does.
she's doing this.
Yeah.
Yes, that's her wardship and such. She's going to be learning a lot, and I think it's going to be more on like an intellectual thing or like learning rather than. I mean, that's like a character trait, but less physical, I guess.
Okay. I'm very excited for
Mhm.
part 3 with you guys. There's some really good scenes in part 3 that I'm very excited for you guys to read. So the only way to do that is to close up this episode and wait for next week. So let's do that. Thank you for joining me, Paul and Elliot. We'll reconvene with our interludes next week.
Peace.
Till next time.